Assalamu alaikum, Molweni, good evening, Goeienaand, Mahaha, Bonsoir, Bao Note to all attendees from South Africa and internationally. My name is Tokir Ahmed, and this is the SciC Fireside Chat in collaboration with the SciC Academy. Thank you for connecting with us today. We hope that today's topic will be thought-provoking for you. Today marks our 14th Fireside Chat, so we encourage you to visit our YouTube channel on SciC TV for all our previous Fireside Chats. And we will obviously then share the link with you accordingly. And if you are then watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. Click the link below, hit the bell icon so that you can then get the latest video. And yeah, please do like the videos as well. So as always, we always just paint a bit of a the purpose of this platform. Um, excuse me, colleagues, I do have a bit of flu, so if there's a bit of snuffling and coughing, do excuse me. So as we explained before the start, especially for those who are new, this platform. So this platform has been set up to discuss, it's aimed at stimulating, discussion around civil engineering. So we don't only limit it to civil engineering. We touch on innovation and smart technologies, matters of mutual importance to civil engineers, and engagement and collaboration with other organizations in other fields of engineering. So civil engineering does not work in isolation. We work together with mechanical engineers, fire engineers, electrical engineers, chemical engineers. A wide range of diverse skills comes to development of certain infrastructure. So we keep that to keep things nice and broad. We host these events, on the second Thursday of every month, with the exception of December and January. So just to give you an expectation of when you can expect the next session as well. And yeah, we engage with the industry, we engage with professionals, academics, and to try and keep a nice, balance between the two. And again, like I said, as much as this is focused on civil engineering, everyone is welcomed. We welcome everyone. If you're interested in civil engineering, if you're an accountant, a doctor, whoever you are, we encourage you to join. And if you have come from the other professions, welcome. And we hope that you enjoy today's conversation. Um, we like to try and keep things active. So we encourage active participation. So once the presentation is done, then we open up the room for questions and answers, and we do a bit of a panel discussion. So as is with the fireside chat, it's where we then gather around the fire and we have a discussion and share stories. So that's the idea of today's discussion. So please feel free to then raise your hand, share your views, questions you might have. Let's have an engaging session. And yeah, so we also then ask if you can then rate the session. It does help us when you answer the questionnaire, helps us to then make sure that we are still relevant. So I'll then also then drop those links in the chat. So if you can also then complete that that questionnaire for us, it is quite helpful. So today's topic, if we look at today's topic, so for decades now, the foundation of our work as civil engineers has been built on an understanding of civil engineering and geotechnical engineering principles. We have designed bridges, buildings, and infrastructure to withstand static loads and predictable forces. But the world is becoming more complex, and so are challenges that we face every day. We are now dealing with dynamic loading and changing loads, aging infrastructure. We have look at our roads. Heavy trucks driving on our roads, things we never expected before, just increasing and increasing as things goes along. So things are becoming unpredictable. This creates a pressing need for a new approach, one that allows us not to only design and build for tomorrow, but to also observe and understand the performance of our structures and infrastructure in real time. And this is now where wireless monitoring comes in. It's application of smart technology to the physical world of civil engineering, and we can think of it as giving infrastructure a nervous system, in the simplest form. Wireless sensors can measure movement, vibration, settlement, and tilt, and a whole lot of other things, which obviously to our guest presenters today will then give us insight into. It tells us how infrastructure is then truly behaving. It gives us a different insight. Um, in this discussion, we'll then explore this, technological revolution. We'll examine how it's being applied to, critical projects, and challenges and opportunities that present itself in terms of shaping our world and our profession. So yeah, we'll look at things from an intellectual and academic point of view, and we'd like to, just to make sure that we have that nice rigor between the two. Um, if you consider now this field of electronics and civil engineering, there's an interesting term comes to mind. It was something that was coined at University of Pretoria called civiltronics. So the electronics and civil engineering, so civiltronics is now where the term has come from. Something that they've also then worked into. It's something that I had showcased before with Dr. Andre Broekman. So if you go through the videos on YouTube, you'll pick up that discussion. We had some very interesting insights into applying electronics and civil engineering together. So civiltronics, a new term that's been coined by University of Pretoria. So yeah, let's have an open mind and be ready to challenge the status quo as we learn from our distinguished speakers. We encourage, again, an engaging dialogue, an open dialogue. Your questions and perspective are quite vital to making this a truly enriching session. So let's explore how continuous innovation can contribute to building a more durable and sustainable future for our built environment. So when we open up the discussion, you can drop your comments in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. That will give you an indication of when we're ready for that. But typically by the end of the presentation. So uh, we've got three guests, on today to take us through this. We've got Alistair de Wet from Sub8 Tech. We've got Huxley Reynolds from also Sub8 Tech, and Dr. Bastian Lenol from Nelson Mandela University, who will then take us through the discussions today. So let me ask each one of them to come through and then introduce themselves. What is it they do, the company they represent. So just a high level. Let's start, Alistair. If we can just come through, then let's test your mic and speaker as well. If you can put on your camera and just tell us who you are.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, as Takir said, I'm Alistair de Wet. I am represent Sub8 Technologies. I worked in just a short little while. My background is largely in the software space, so having worked for global vendors like Autodesk over the last 20 odd years. But yeah, we're very excited about the opportunity to present to you guys today. If you can, please have some patience with me. I've had a bit of a family bereavement, so I'm doing this presentation, or I'm participating from Port Alfred on a bit of a dodgy connection, so I may flit in and out. So just bear with me, please. Luckily, Huxley will be doing most of the presenting, so that's me.
Okay. No, thanks, Alistair, and condolences on the loss. Sorry to hear about it. Condolences to the family as well. Huxley, over to you. Are you on mute, Huxley?
Right. Hi, everybody. First of all, just to all the ladies out there, Happy Women's Month. I hope it's been filled with sunshine and flowers, and I hope it continues. So yes, Happy Women's Month, and don't worry, guys, we'll get there at some stage. And firstly, my background, I've been in various levels of business most of my life. I've worked with brands such as Leica Geosystems, Geofenol, Sensieve, Geosense, Geocon, etc., and some recent new ones, which we'll be telling about the market about soon. I'm a bit of a measurement freak. My background is largely in the last sort of 10 years or so in geomatics. I've learned a huge amount from the survey industry. I love the guys. I really think they're crackerjack. And yeah, they've, as most professionals, if you ask a professional a question, they'll always be glad to share information with you and tell you why. So I'm kind of really enjoying the engineering industry, and a big up to all of you. Thanks very, very much. And we might be monitoring people and telemetry people and product and distribution and customer support, but at the end of the day, we learn so much from you. So thank you very much for that.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming to present to us today. Actually, much appreciated. Dr. Bastian, if you can put your camera on and also introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Bastien Linol. I've been appointed as the director of the Africa Earth Observatory Network at Nelson Mandela University. And we are driving research in the field of Earth and planetary science, especially in Africa. So we're trying to do a lot of fieldwork with masters and PhDs at the university, and trying to build a laboratory to try to better understand the Earth and develop Earth stewardship. These days, we are developing really new research under the sea. So we're trying to create marine geology at the university. And we had some project over the past 2 years around the harbor of Kura. And it has been very exciting to drive this new research, which include a lot of geophysics and marine coring. So yeah, we are doing a lot of different aspects, everything that can excite us and the student to be able to grow and develop themselves as a researcher.
Thank you, Dr. Bastian. And some exciting work that you're doing there. It'll be interesting to see how we tie it back into today's topic as well. Much appreciated for joining us today. So colleagues, that's pretty much the introduction. And so yeah, so I think then we can then start with the presentation. Huxley, if you want to just put it on and just let's make sure it's running. We can share your screen. Okay. Just to go into presentation mode.
Are you seeing it?
Yes. Over to you, Huxley. We may continue. Thank you.
Great. So yes, again, so thanks very, very much for the forum, Takira. I really appreciate it. I've had a lot of discussions in the past 3 months with a lot of civil engineering companies from all walks of life, really, and all sorts of disciplines. And clearly, there's been a lot of questions about what is monitoring and what can it do and what does it look like. So I think from our perspective, we're trying to expose monitoring and give people an idea of just exactly what's out there in the market and possibly where it's going to. Just a caveat, though, I would really like to emphasize that all types of monitoring are relevant in the application that they deserve. So there isn't a right way or a wrong way. I'm glad people are monitoring, but in some applications there are better ways to do it than others. And that's really my focus today, is to try and look at it from a basic level. We're trying not to get too technical, and we're also not trying to be product specific, as it were. I'm trying to keep things fairly generic. So broadly, we'll have a look at some key trends and some key drivers. We'll have a look at 6 different types of monitoring, which I hope to flesh out for you and explain why. And then very briefly, some examples of some technology that's out there, some pictures of things so that you can see what they look like, etc. And then we'll close with some questions. So if I can continue and move on. For some other reason, my slides are not changing, Takira. I don't know if it's a network issue.
Okay.
So
there you go.
When we talk about wireless geotechnical and structural monitoring, let's just consider that the discipline of it belongs in the engineering sciences, regulatory frameworks, and material performance industries. That's very high level, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about there. And then what we're also talking about is the drivers and what's making this technology more relevant. It is a very technical discipline. It combines numerous different technology disciplines that are melded into one. We often make reliance on third party like GSM networks and things like this, which I'll explain and flesh out in a little while. And then, of course, the industry is experiencing significant growth, and there are many technical advantage trends, which I think engineering companies can make use of. So if I go into the next slide. It's taking a little longer.
Huxley, do you maybe want to put the camera off just to maybe improve the bandwidth, perhaps? It might just yeah, help with the presentation as well.
Try with that. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be helping. And as usual, as a technology company, this is what we face.
Huxley, are you sharing a window or sharing screen?
I'm actually sharing the screen, not the window, the actual presentation.
Okay, so it's not moving on your side either, or it's just not moving in the Teams window?
It's not moving in the Teams window. So let me just try and stop share quickly and just restart it.
Yeah.
Sorry for the delay,
I can share from my
everybody.
side, but it will just be the PDF version that I have. Actually, that's but yeah, I think let's try again on your side.
There we go. We're
Okay.
going.
Okay,
So
there you go.
let's get into the key drivers. First of all, infrastructure development. If we look at that section, we're talking about the increasing investment. We all know this. I'm a huge fan of what Sanral is doing. Every time I see Sanral do a project, so big up to you guys. You guys are doing some interesting things. I'm getting a very horrible window here that's blocking me. But anyway, if we look at population growth and things like that, we're always going to have more infrastructure. And then engineers, you guys are tasked with building things, gee whiz, smarter, better, faster, thinner, bigger, more flex, more this, more that. And really, at the end of the day, monitoring helps you really conform or confirm to that performance hypothesis that you designed for. And then in South Africa, we've got many areas of older legacy assets. We've dealt with some projects over the last 6 months that you haven't been beyond design life, but have experienced significantly greater traffic loading and things like that, or weather events that have accelerated the deformation of some structures. And monitoring helps with that. And then, of course, my big passion is maintenance and lifespan. What's optimal? What works? Maintenance is a huge thing for me. We don't seem to have enough people to get to structures. We have to travel long distances. We have to incur the risk of travel, the cost of accommodation, and all of these sort of things. So for me, how do we get our data quicker, better, sooner, faster? And then, of course, safety and regulatory compliances. There are some stringent safety regulations out there. And, what are we doing about that? There's a trend towards self-governance. Recently, we had a discussion with someone that mentioned to us that inspectors are not looking at monitoring as a tool. There's more of a is the corporate not doing the monitoring, or they're not checking themselves? And then, of course, the last point under safety, I was mentored many, many years ago by a gentleman called Mike Livingston Blevins from Anglo American. And he asked me a very simple question. He said to me, can you defend your actions 100%? And for me, that's what monitoring's about. It's about having the data, having the facts, and having the ability to say, I can defend my actions 100%. Cost savings are a big issue. Everything's more expensive nowadays. Everybody's under budgets. The market is really competitive. People want the biggest value for the lowest price. Things like that that are raising their head quite a lot in the monitoring space. But we can also help with companies that are, let's say, for example, have a lot of bridge structures. How do they optimize their cost in terms of maintaining them? What's a good threshold to look at there? And then IoT and AI. Just recently, I've attended an online conference with an American company that's now talking about no longer a passive structure. They're talking about a structure that is an active structure that changes its behavior utilizing AI. So, for example, when traffic is very, very big, the structure is able to do something versus when traffic's very low, the structure does another thing and so forth. So very, very interesting and probably far beyond my pay grade. And then there's a huge drive towards mass data, centralized knowledge-based teams, control rooms. In the mining space, most mines have very state-of-the-art monitoring and condition control rooms, where you have maybe 10 people sitting there on a shift, looking at probably 100 different monitoring sites or points or conditions or whatever of the operation. So IoT, AI, very, very, very big driver in this business. And I hope I don't have to exit and restart again. Let's just see.
Couple projects with Square for business solutions. So as
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be Takir. So I'm just going to do this again.
Okay, should be fine.
Unfortunately, I hope I don't have to do this on every slide. The key trends, again, we've just finished off on the previous slide with the adoption of IoT, but really at the end of the day, most companies are now adopting wireless sensor networks. You've had them in your offices for years. You've got Wi-Fi in your offices with laptops, and in a sense, you've got radio signals to your cell phone, which is essentially wireless. So I think the companies are becoming smarter. They're looking for better ways to do things. And then we have tech mergers. Different technologies are merging with other technologies, and people are finding very interesting ways of doing things. And I don't think that's entirely new. We've got LoRaWAN that runs in many cities all over the world, where the municipal bodies are monitoring everything from a structural movement to groundwater, to sewers, to traffic, etc. So the 868 megahertz LoRaWAN protocol is very, very widely known and being used much, much more. And then it's not only safety rated that we talk about. My big focus for the next few years is in operational predictive maintenance. I'm really interested in how engineers are going to come up with solutions there. Someone asked me, how would you AI a bridge, for example? And, when we started to make a list of the inputs, we ran out of paper. There were so many different factors that influence a bridge and its ability to have predictive maintenance. So I think we're really entering some really interesting spaces together with our engineering partners. And then enabling engineers to monitor the structures and systems from everywhere, reducing the need for too frequent physical inspections. Let's rather say that, because I'm still a fan of physical inspections, and improving the response times. I was recently on a site where the engineer had to travel from Uppington to come and meet me on another site, probably about 200 kilometers away. And this chap had to leave early in the morning and fight the sort of trucks on the road and things like that. So I don't think we all take cognizance of the risks that we have when we travel. If anybody's traveled the Piet Retief Pongola section, you'd know what I'm talking about in terms of trucks. And then there's, I I don't necessarily think it's new, but I think a lot of consulting engineering firms are becoming, they're expanding their product ranges, let's rather say, into these PSFs that we call them. They're offering additional services and making their businesses more valuable. So that's a big push for us as technology providers to be aware and how do we help these guys. And then we often have, particularly in the mining space, the mining regulator is always looking for proof or evidence of how the mine, for example, is looking after their structures or their assets and so forth. And they want to see that proof of condition. And if you're able to do that at the click of a button and show people, then I think that settles a lot of nerves. And then, of course, again, advancements in data analytics. Engineers are always coming up with new things. I like the mantra that, machine learning is great, but engineers remain king. And I hope we don't forget that. So let's get into a little bit of monitoring, really, and what is it? And this is where I'd like to really take you from ground level upwards. Monitoring can be random. It's usually typical spot check and based on some level of interpretive experience. But it really isn't a scientific approach to how a structure is performing and so forth. Then we have infrequent monitoring, which is informal awareness. I know I should monitor. When I get the time, I'll go and have a look at it. I might take a tape measure with me or an automatic level or loosely termed a dumpy level, and I'll go and measure out, take some levels and see what's going on. But typically, I would write that down on a piece of paper. So it's subject to interpretation, and in some cases, dyslexia. I've seen that in some of the mining applications. And then how much time do you have? Did you have time to get there? You've got to travel there. People who have got assets in very remote areas, it's not so easy to do, practically speaking. And then regular, we have more formalized approach to things. We have checklists. We have some form of performance standard. We have some form of comparison to the previous, but it's really not a scientific approach. Where I might go out and I might measure from point A to point C, the next person who does the checklist 3 months or 6 months later might start at point B and measure to point C, and we end up with compounded errors and over a period of time. If you're consistently adding, let's say, variable measurements because we use different reference points or baselines, then we don't really have a long-term scientific accuracy. I'm going to try and flip the slide again. Then we have planned, and this is where I really start to enjoy the science of measuring. This is typically a geomatics professional. They use some of the most advanced instrumentation out there and are really very complementary towards the wireless monitoring industry. And often a surveyor would be a precursor to the decision to implement a monitoring system, which is perhaps on an existing structure or something like that. The unfortunate part of it is that surveying, if you're not doing automated measurements, and I refer here to a surveyor that has to travel out to a structure, again, there's just a business case for it takes a long time to get there. It costs more because it's additional labor and so forth. And then it's not really conducive to dynamic monitoring. We would have the gaps in the behavior. So if I go on the 1st of the month versus the 1st of the next month and so forth, I'm not really seeing what's going on in the 30 days in between. And if the structure is not moving much and everything is okay, then I guess these gaps are fine, and there's no problem with that. But where we start to pick up an accelerated deformation or displacement, that's when we want to try and move to something more relevant in terms of more frequent, but more economic. And that then brings me into the logger space. The loggers are really, really intelligent. They can store a lot of data, and they can take measurements every 5 minutes, every 60 minutes, every half a day, whatever's relevant to the project and the requirement. Again, the unfortunate part of loggers is most of the time you have to take the data from the logger, you have to put it in some form of computation to get some form of computed results. So there is a bit of post-processing required. And when you start talking about a lot of data or a lot of assets, then you start to create a lot of labor. And then the unfortunate part of loggers is because they're not real time and they're not online, you're not going to get the alerts on your critical structures. And let me again stress, if the structure is not critical, then there's no need to have critical alerts. However, if the structure is critical, for example, a deep excavation or a bridge that's carrying traffic loads that has been damaged by, I don't know, high flood waters, for example, then you'd want to have some form of real-time alerting. So loggers wouldn't necessarily be the best tool to use, in my view. So they're good for low cost and functional and frequent data point trend monitoring, but not always the best for real time and computed results with less labor and so forth. And then the other thing with loggers is in South Africa in particular, we can't just go and install a logger where the access is easy to get to. You can walk there and reach with your hand and plug in your download unit, whether that be a USB or a tablet, or in some cases a cell phone, because of theft, because of vandalism, damages, and so forth. So you may be required to place that logger in a place that's difficult to access, or is in a big sealed, secure steel box, for example, things like that. So there could be additional costs related, or additional frustrations related to loggers. Then my big passion, continuous wireless structural monitoring. Really the benefits of that, we're taking everything in terms of from survey accuracies and better in some instances, all into one platform. We're taking all of the log data and we're wirelessly transmitting it and we're computing it. So essentially it's a centralized hub of sensors, network, and software. And we're able to update those sensors and networks remotely, so we don't necessarily need to always go to site. You can get a greater range of data measurements. A surveyor would perhaps not be able to give you strain from rebar, which is in situ in concrete, things like that. He would only be able to give you surface measurements, whereas wireless wireless connections would allow you greater flexibility in terms of all of that. And then computed results save you a lot of labor, save you a lot of time. Project lifetime data trends is a big one, especially if you're monitoring for maintenance. You're generally looking at anything from 5-year and sometimes 10-year data trends that people are looking for, and they want the computer They want the software to keep the data for the full term of the project. They want to be able to go back 5 years. They want to be able to compare it to, for example, climatic conditions, things like that. So really looking at looking after your client's data is extremely important. And then networks give you a lot more redundancy. We have long and short range networks. The long range networks are typically called a star network, which I'll show you in a slide or two's time. And then we have short range networks, which are meshed networks, where the sensors all talk to each other. And in some cases, this is quite applicable, because if you have a sensor go down or it's not able to talk to its gateway communicator, then it can talk to its brother or sister and send its data through that way. So it really improves your redundancy and your makes the network more robust. You have high data and low data packets. It's not so simple to just say we'll go and connect a camera and we'll take readings every 5 minutes to something. You need to make sure that you've got enough data capacity in terms of upload speeds with your networks. There are a lot of things to have a look at that, and I'll flesh that out shortly. And then, yes, exceedingly flexible. We can probably accommodate just about any type of, let's say, sensor instrument in this instance. So anything from a weather station right the way through to a strain gauge or a tilt sensor. There are really too many to actually sit and talk about. I think we've probably got over 1,000 different types of sensors that we can talk to. And then we'd like to say that wireless structural monitoring is an install and forget exercise. Really, at the end of the day, it's a monitor from anywhere. Today's hardware is really robust. We've got some installations in some mine shafts where the instruments are performing exceedingly well under really bad acid mine water drainage type situations. The communication networks are getting better and better and better. And as particularly South Africa migrates 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, we're really looking towards the more remote areas being 5G enabled, because it would really benefit our industry greatly. And then, as again, I keep on harping on about machine learning and AI. I think this is the new thing for us in monitoring, and we're still trying to get our heads around it. And I'm quite sure there are engineers in the world that are going to come up with all sorts of interesting products there. And then really just, we've got a number of customers that are using our sensors for instant analysis. They want the data now. They don't want to wait. They're going into a meeting. They need to produce a report. They need to monitor it because it's safety critical. Things like that, which make wireless monitoring far better. If you think that you've got an embankment or a bridge in a remote or a rural area, which is a couple of hours drive away, how would you get that data immediately? And the answer really is to go wireless. And then multi-site and multi-party segmentation and alerting. The software is getting much more cleverer, where the engineer is able to collate data from an engineering perspective, but farm out, let's say, the alerting data to a third party. So we're able to segment access to the software. We're able to segment alerts and multi-sites under one particular platform. So wireless monitoring really, how do I put this? It really is the pinnacle of being able to monitor a structure without incurring too much labor. And I know Takira had a cost question later, and I think one sort of needs to look at the long-term benefits of monitoring as opposed to the short-term send someone out for an observation, these sort of things. So in my experience, and there's a few people on this call today that I've personally dealt with, and together we've worked on a lot of problems. It's not a cut and paste, and it's not that simple. But at the outset, from a legal perspective, in South Africa, we have regulations. You, as an importer of equipment, you need to be certified or registered with your country regulator. If you go and buy a new cell phone today, you will find that the cell phone has an ICASA approval attached to it, and we are no different. And then the second thing is that as an importer, we have to register with NRCS, and we pay a fee, which we're unfortunately not able to carry over to the client, but it's a small fee, but it is a fee that we have to pay across to the regulator for every unit that we import. And if you are looking at equipment, we all know that there are international standards, RoHS and CE and so forth. But it really is important that you understand those certifications and what they mean. IP ratings, for example, are often bandied about that something's IP67 or IP68, and do all of us really understand what does the 6 and what does the 8 mean in terms of an IP rating? And then your raw data is really important. You need to be able to provide traceable raw data. And really, I try and emphasize this, that if ever, which we hope never, but if ever you're in a court of law, you need to be able to deliver the raw data from the project if it's interrogated as much. So just have a look at your networks and see if they are able to give you audit compliant or traceable data. And then accuracy and reliability is a big thing. There are many people that talk about accuracy, but is it a relative accuracy or is it an absolute accuracy? And neither are incorrect. It really just is important that the user understands what data they're getting. Temperature compensated data on a tilt meter, for example, is quite important in my view. It may not be important to everybody, but from a monitoring perspective, it's pretty important, I think. And then multi-year accuracy. You don't want drift in your data. I've heard of instances. I had a meeting last week with a gentleman where he mentioned to me that he wants his data and or reliability to last 50 years. For example, in a concrete dam wall, we don't want data to last 2 or 3 years, or 5 or 10 years for that matter. So that puts a lot of pressure on the quality of sensor that you're using. The wireless network, not so much, because I think over that period of time it will change. But when you've got a strain gauge attached to a piece of rebar within a concrete bridge, you most certainly can't just go and take that instrument out and swap it around. So the correct quality of instrument, really important. Another one that comes to mind is vibrating wire piezometers, used in many hydraulic applications, from dams to tailings dams and so forth. And then the other thing, the big bear in the room for me in terms of South Africa and what I've learned, is that your data latency between your communication node and your gateway may well be really, really good, but you're not always assured, because you're using a GSM network which belongs to a third party, and sometimes that third party equipment goes down, or it's only 2G and it can't transmit enough megabytes per second to give you the immediate alerting. So I always try and impress upon clients that we should look at site visits. We should understand the environment that we're looking to install in before we actually specify a system. It's really important that we're open about this. When we first started with monitoring, we were really under the impression that the GSM networks were quite robust. Admittedly, that was also a load shedding time. And we've had a lot of challenges with the GSM networks. And there are some clients on this call that would be nodding their heads right now, because we've definitely not had an easy road on some sites, but yet on others we've had really good. So it's important that you understand the third-party infrastructure around your project. And then from a cost point of view, really at the end of the day, I underline battery life of the nodes. There are some very, very good nodes out there where they'll give you battery lives of 10 or 15 years. But bear in mind that's ruled by two power consumption events. The first one is, what is the frequency of reporting? Is that 30 minutes, 15 minutes, once an hour, once a day, etc.? That affects the power in the nodes. And then, of course, if the node cannot connect to the gateway, it will keep on trying to connect to the gateway. So making sure that your telemetry is correct will also assist you in having long node life. Particularly on a bridge where your node is installed over a river, or you have to do lane closures and traffic management and things like that. So it's not such a pleasurable thing to do. I've recently had to deal with a site where we had cold shock on a very, very cold snap a couple of weeks ago in a mine shaft, where we had some batteries actually fail. And it's very difficult because you've got to stop the mine's production. You've got to go in there and you've got to go and replace these nodes. You inconvenience people and operations. So it's really important to just have a look at your equipment and see what you're putting in. And then another business issue I come across is CapEx and OpEx. Often we will get a call during construction or very close to the end of construction, and the engineer wants to install a monitoring system, and then they have to go to the PM to try and see if there's budget and so forth. And then we end up having to install less of a system because of the available budget. And that's not always perfect. And so there's a lot of compromises that one has to make. And then overall, we do get phone calls where people want to put the most advanced, the best, and more quantity than may be required on a structure. And my advice is that becomes costly. And as with instruments, you need to manage them. So my advice would be to start with the basics, analyze the behavior, and then just try and expand as required. Maybe that will keep it simple, I think is the word I'd like to use. The more complex your structure, the more complex it's going to be to manage. Then in summary, really at the end of the day, and continue to stress that all types of monitoring have their place. But if we start in the bottom left, random monitoring doesn't give you a lot of functionality, but it's not that expensive. If you look at infrequent, it's slightly more costly, but not really a whole lot of functionality. Regular monitoring, we start to incur a bit more cost because of the labor involved, but the functionality is not quite there from a technically computed point of view. And then planned monitoring, yes, high cost. My geomatics colleagues, fantastic instrumentation, everything from a drone to a scanner, Yeah, these guys really, really are good at what they do. But unfortunately, there is some post-processing involved. There's slightly reduced functionality because we can't add in, for example, a strain gauge or a hidden water level meter or something like that. Then logging, yes, less costly, bit more functionality. But again, I'll stress that you need to do some post-processing with logging to get its full benefits, and you're not able to get your critical alerts. And then, of course, wireless. Yes, it's costly, or can be costly if you don't approach the simple concept. And wireless gives you a lot of functionality, and you can do a lot with it. We've got quite a few clients that are drawing data off of our main platform for processing within other more intelligent platforms. So yeah, wireless gives you a lot of benefits, and all I'm really trying to do is set out when you do plan a monitoring project, consider all of these. They all have their place, and see which one is going to work for you best. And then, in our experience, what does the engineering market want? Really, at the end of the day, trust and ease of use. Those are the main drivers that we sit with, and what builds trust is a reliable service provider. You need to have a demonstrable peace of mind product. You need to have some proven project experience, whether that's backed up by your peers or within your own departments, but you do need to have some level of experience in that. And then, in my view, in South Africa, we don't like logging tickets. We like to talk to humans. Just today, I had a Wi-Fi issue where I had to log a ticket, and it drove me nuts. So I think for us as Sub8, you'll always be able to talk to a human, and we're never going to introduce logging a ticket. And then applicable accuracy and reliability. Engineers really want to trust the data they're getting. And it's really important. I have one customer, a big shout out to Henry. You'll know who you are. Very, very detailed, and tests every bit of data that has come out of some of our systems, and really are well appreciated. It's really important that the data is repeatable, and that we don't have inconsistency over extended periods. And then intuitive software, really easy stuff to understand. It doesn't necessarily need to be complicated on the front end for you to get your results that you're looking for. A lot of computer systems, a lot of visualization platforms out there will do the computing for you in the background, and make your graphs and your computer data really easy to understand. And then real-time monitoring. Engineers are asking us for fast updates. They want to know what's happening with their structure probably every minute of the day. And then multi-parting alerting. That's really important. People are sometimes not available, so you want to have some form of redundancy. You want to be able to alert multiple people, multiple departments all at the same time. And then it needs to be cost effective and value driven. And it's something that, unfortunately, in South Africa, I started monitoring at probably in the region of about 13 Rand to the dollar. Today, we're at close to 18. And it's not easy to bring really good technology at a low price that people expect. So please look at the different stages of monitoring and really understand what you're looking for. And then flexible commercial options, higher and short term. You can imagine a construction company that's got a deep excavation and they want to monitor the shoring or the sidewalls of the excavation. They're going to sink a parking lot and it's going to be there for 6 months, and then the concrete's in. So why would they want to buy a system that they would have to write off over a period of 3 years? So please talk to us if there are short-term requirements, and we'll certainly do our best to help you. Ease of installation, really efficient setups. Some of our clients are installing their own instrumentation now, and it's going really well. So it really makes me feel good that they've adopted the correct setup procedures in doing things. And we want to have the least disruption. At the end of the day, engineers don't want to be told that they need to tell the main client that they need to stop the operations so that we can come along and install a few sensors. We really need to be able to work within and around the workings as they are going on. And then importantly, your instrumentation needs to be reusable and relocatable. I gave you an example of a shoring setup for an underground parking lot. Once you're done with that instrumentation, you may want to be able to use it on the high-rise deck. You might want to measure flex or tilt in the columns or something like that. So we need to be able to have multiple use cases for this instrumentation. I don't think that's all that the engineering market wants. One of the reasons why we're on this call is that I'd really like to hear more about what do you want so that we can go and do our homework and provide you what you need. So in the question section, please let us know what more do you need. Trying to just move forward. Then let's look at the sensor and quality. It's really important that you have certified calibrations, particularly when it comes to, can I trust the data? Can I trust what I'm getting? Is it right? Will it stand up to peer review? Things like that. You do need to start looking at calibrations and manufacturer approvals and manufacturer certifications. And then look at your, in terms of your rotational tilt meters, they need to be flexible. Just a word of caution, triaxial tilt meters aren't necessarily tri. They are usually biaxial. It's really just the orientation that we place the tilt meter in. So if it's placed on a horizontal basis, you might use the X and Y axis. Whereas if we place it on a vertical on the side of a building or something like that, we would use the Y and the Z axis. But please do have a look at the accuracies and the repeatability together. I have experienced people talk about accuracy, but not repeatability. And repeatability really is the important part, and it tells us how consistently that sensor would operate. And then IP67 up, IP68, IPX8, things like that. If you just Google IP ratings, you'll get an idea of what you're looking at. And please really have a close look at that, because installing an instrument somewhere and then it suffers from a moisture ingress or something like that. Some of these sensors can be quite expensive, and it's really important to have a high IP rating on your sensors. If I look at the mounting options, engineers want easy options. We want to be able to place things in a particular area very easily. Again, I don't want to be sitting on the structure for too long with a cherry picker, so I need to have the correct bracketry and things like that. So most of our range will come with applicable bracketry, and often it will come with a very flexible range of bracketry. Then look at your sampling frequencies. If you are not doing critical monitoring, you'll probably be using a LoRa type network instead of our flat mesh type network. That long life battery friendly sampling rate is really important. 30 minutes to an hour is pretty good. You should get very long battery lives out of your nodes, at least 10 years. But if you do increase your sampling rates to 5 minutes and things like that, just be aware that you are going to impact your power base of your nodes. And threshold triggered alerts, really important to engineers again. Engineers want to know if it's sort of moving versus is it starting to move, or is it critical? When does it become a major or a critical problem? Things like that are really important to engineers. And then dynamic escalation sampling, when an event does occur, you want your monitoring system to be able to include the subsequent movements so that you can get a good idea of the trending. And then in the vibration world, peak acceleration and velocity sampling, really important from a seismicity or a vibration problem. I've recently had one in Cape Town where we could not obtain the specification because the building inspector didn't have it and didn't know what we should be monitoring for vibration. So that's maybe something the engineering community can look at. Compatibility, seamless integration, existing systems and software, that's really important. Your software should not be a closed system. Engineers have their own type of systems, and they want to integrate monitoring data into their existing software systems. So you should be flexible in that. And then the ability to reuse and relocate instrumentation is important from a sensor point of view. For example, our tilt sensors have got a telemetry component as well as a sensing component or a tilt component. And that's why I repeat this point compared to the previous slide. And then if we just give you a typical example of what some things look like, on the sensor side, on the far left, we have some rotational tilt sensors. We have digital cameras. We have vibrating wire piezometers, strain gauges, pressure cells. The list is really too numerous to mention, and there are variants of each one as well. But that should give you an idea that the sensor would talk to some form of wireless hardware, perhaps akin to your router in your office. That's the wireless hardware's role. That would talk to some form of gateway that is going to connect you to the internet, whether that be a LAN cable, satellite, or whether it be GSM. And then you would have some idea of the wireless network that you want to run. Is it a long range, wide area network, or is it a short range, intelligent network that can accommodate much higher feeds of data? And then if you look at the software side of things, you need to have some level of visualization software for the client. And then we have our own InfraGuard software for critical assets. That would be used on a bridge, for example, or a mine shaft, steel structure, things like that. And then you need to also bear in mind, if the client's got their own type of software, they may not want your visualization software. They may just want your data. And that's the reason why we have Senseive.io, and we can give you that data in raw format. What does a good wireless system look like? I think really the emphasis here is, for anybody who's ever been involved in IT, you know all of these sort of things. I don't think it's anything new to anybody. I think really just at the end of the day is I'd like to talk about the mesh system. For critical structures, the mesh system is probably the better system. And then the LoRa system, which has been around for a good 15, 20 years, which is a star network. The main difference between the two is the mesh system can carry a lot more data. It's far more intelligent. It's far more robust. It is unfortunately, though, not a 10-kilometer range system. It is a more condensed system, ideally suited to between the 300, 500 meter marks. And then your star system, that's going to give you up to 15 kilometers, terrain dependent. Certainly not 15 kilometers within a city. Probably going to get between 3 and 4 kilometers in a city environment. But the main thing I'd like to leave you with here is to just tell you that encrypting the data is really important. From an IT perspective, on many sites that we've installed on, the IT department is starting to play a greater role in the specification. And one of the main questions is how are you protecting the data? How are you making sure our data is secure? And for us, we encrypt the data at the node or at the sensor. We do not encrypt the data once it arrives in the software. So from a data security point of view, it's probably the best place that one could do that. And then some popular local use applications in mining, tailing storage facilities, a really large and critical, and in my experience, has been a very interesting market to be in. Mine shafts, yeah, anything from the steel work to the linings of the shafts, tunnels and development from in terms of the hanging wall, looking at rock strain and communicating the geotech's data or the rock engineer's data, process plants, large conveyors, silos, storage bins, large tanks, things like that. And then open pit and Provisio on open pit. Most open pit mines have very good monitoring systems, anything from INSAR to radar to automatic total stations that are half-second accuracies. So really, our sensors are used more in hidden or shadowed areas, or where there's a specific fault with a specific issue that people want to look at. Then in infrastructure, bridges, embankments, excavations, cavities, buildings, I think this is the easiest thing to relate to from a monitoring perspective. Rail, particularly geometry, and the infrastructure around the rail. So if you go back to the previous point, rail, bridges, embankments, and so forth. Rail geometry is a really, really interesting topic. And it's proving to be more instrumentation on rail is a big thing nowadays. Then if we look at ports, quaysides, we've got some tilt sensors underwater that are on some of the quaysides, and then decks and platforms, high traffic, high loading areas, dam reservoirs. We all know these things. And then in agriculture, maize silos, things like that. Just a few examples of what a visualization platform can do for you. If you look at the top right, top left image, where you have colorization of certain nodes that are sitting on a rockfall catch fence. And this is above a railway line, where the red is a higher alert than the yellow, and so forth and so forth. You can get immediate readings, hover your mouse over these things, and they'll tell you what's going on. And then underneath that is really just an example of a tilt sensor mounted in an open pit, a sensor mounted underneath a railway track, and then in the top right, monitoring cracks on a historical building, and looking at the joints really. And then tilt sensors again on rail, and down the bottom, on the bottom right, is really just borehole hydrology, water level monitoring, utilizing digital nodes. And then this is just really a very quick, let's call it a video on what happens when tilt sensors fail. Or an embankment fails. You'll see the tilt sensors all start to talk to each other. and really is just a very quick visualization of what wireless monitoring can do for you. In this instance, Sensieve, our technology partner, has got a camera that is connected to the event. So as soon as one tilt sensor starts to move, the camera starts to record the imagery of the failure. Very, very interesting. Again, the cameras are really high resolution, but I don't think it's not unique to the monitoring industry. We've got lots of security cameras out there that are as capable as well. But this just shows you what monitoring can do for you in terms of understanding what's going on. If you can perhaps just imagine that you're 500 kilometers away from the site, and you get an alert and you'd like to not travel there for a false alarm, you might want to log in and have a look. And this allows you to do that. It would obviously give you evidentiary evidence if something more needs to happen with whatever happened there. And then really our exclusive technology partners, the people that we work with a lot, Sensieve, probably are the largest wireless solutions equipment and software provider globally. We've been with Sensieve for many years, really enjoy their product, and for us even very great supporters. And then we have Omnidots, based out of the Netherlands, using their vibration product mostly. A really interesting product and really works well. And for a MEM sensor versus a geophone, I'm told that it performs remarkably well. And then we do many, many, many third-party integrations. Sensieve manufacture their own tilt sensors and some temperature sensors and some crack gauges and so forth. But they don't do vibrating wire piezometers, for example. They don't make strain gauges. But we are able to integrate all of these different types of equipments into our systems. So if we don't have the product under the Sensieve label, we will certainly have it with all of our other equipment supplier partners. And then finally, without getting too far into monitoring, I think the very big perception is tech helps, but there's no replacement for the correct understanding of what you're looking to achieve and using the proper methodologies and really applying analytical thinking. We get a lot of calls from a lot of people asking us for monitoring, particularly if a tender is out and the tender says that you must monitor using vibrating wire piezometers. But when we start to ask questions about, how deep, how far, how long, what type of network, what is the result that you're looking for, very often we don't really get the information that we'd like to hear. So please, before specifying a monitoring system, please give us a call, find out what's possible and what's out there, and we'd love to help you. And then lastly, our journey with engineers really, honestly, has been very fulfilling. And I hope it continues to be that way. And thank you. We learn from you all the time. You challenge us as technology providers. And so I hope it continues. And that will allow us to deliver more to you in terms of the things that you want. So thanks very much. And I think that brings me to the end of our presentation. And I think if we can get into the questions.
No, thank you, Huxley. Very much appreciated. Thank you very much for the very insightful, and exciting presentation. Shows you what is, what's possible with technology, and then the world is moving very fast. Colleagues, I'm mindful of time. We have about 10 minutes to go, and if you don't mind us just going a little bit over by 5-10 minutes, just to take some questions and comments. Excuse me. I'd like to first maybe give Dr. Lionel just maybe some comments and views from your side, and then we'll go into the hands. So Dr. Lionel, basically now If you look at the presentation that was given, just if you could just share your views. And what I was specifically just touch on as well is that you yourself also have experience in using these, so you are technically an end user. So just to get your views as well, in terms of, so obviously you've used it in a very unique application in terms of, your geological, investigations. So your experiences using this type of tech, challenges, highlights, just maybe give us from an end user perspective. Yeah, just your experience, Doctor.
Yes, the presentation was fantastic. It's very refreshing to see all the technology that is available, and I certainly have not used a lot of it. But as a geologist, what I wanted to comment on is the links we have between doing the structural geology and this electronic systems that monitor the Earth. Wanted to give two examples. We have global system of GPSs and seismometer that measure the day-to-day speed and direction of how the continent move and how we create mountains, and that's informed a lot for the risk, but it also helps the geologist to understand what he can see at the surface of the Earth and design the model. So in other words, it gives us a live view of what's going on. And in geology, we are not able to do that because the rocks are here and they were formed in the past. So at another scale, and vice versa. So if you have a little bit of a knowledge in South Africa, for example, about how the Southern Cape was created, the structural that were born, and how the sea level has changed, it gives you a better position to design where do you want to put your monitoring system. And one of these questions I have at this stage is, for example, where we're going to build the next nuclear power station for South Africa. And to have a geological background does help to choose the site where to monitor. So I wanted to make the comment that I think this technology that was presented and the work that I'm doing is very complementary. And I'm really looking forward to see how the project gonna develop, and are we going to be able to integrate more and more of this these very high-tech tools.
No, thanks for that, Doctor. So I mean, essentially, then what you're indicating from an end user point of view, you see value, especially in your unique, application as well. Just challenges, and maybe just if I can touch on that, then I'll go to the hands. Any specific challenge that you face? So obviously, Huxley mentioned a few challenges that they would have experienced as a developer and risks and whatnot. So just as an end user, what would your challenges be in this respect when it comes to sensors?
I think the main challenge is the geology. The natural system is so complex and variable that we don't have a good idea of what it is. And therefore, it's difficult to design which system need to be used. So in my experience, it has been almost always indispensable to have different type of measuring sensor, especially in the place where we cannot access. So in my marine survey, because we cannot easily go deep under the sea, it is always good to have different tool. And then using the different measurements, we are able to now decide if an anomaly is a geological structures or if it could be something else. So in geology, the geophysics, we always like to use 2 or 3 or as many as possible monitoring system on top of each other. And in general, we do that at different times. So on one survey, we will do the magnetic survey. On another survey, we'll do the bathymetry. On another survey, we will do the seismic. But it's and it's very important for geologists to have samples, to have data from the ground, so that we can calibrate the measurements.
No, thanks for the view. And so basically, look, I think maybe just to look at your field specifically, it's quite unique, and I guess it's trial and error as well. You try the different instruments and see what you get, and then obviously you'll know going forward. But thanks for that view as well. Okay, so let's go to the hands. I've got 2 hands. I'll take 2 hands, and I'll just take a comment from the chat, and then we'll come back with any other questions. So first hand, Masingita. Okay, we'll take 3 hands, and then I'll go to the comments. So it's Masingita, you can come through. Then I'll take Masha, Bella, and then Kubi. So let's take those three hands. Masingita. You should be able to unmute on your side.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yes, continue.
Yeah. Yes, just a question with regarding to this technological system. Is it applied in the renewable industry so far, based on your experience?
I could just, could you quantify renewable? Are you talking a wind turbine or something else?
Yeah, more specifically on the geotechnical side of the wind turbines and the foundations for BESS and for the solar PVs. Have you done any works with that regard?
So typically, when it comes to the geotechnical side, we've done lots of geotechnical or supplied lots of equipment for geotechnical installations. And really, if you're talking about monitoring a water level or a flooding or a stability of the rock strata, things like that, certainly lots of instrumentation available for you. But I wouldn't necessarily classify that type of installation a renewable site-specific installation. It's more general geology or rock engineering or water management for that matter.
Okay.
Okay, no, that's
so
clear.
Yes, it's available to you. Some of the simplest things are available to you there.
Yeah. So I take it then you'll also then monitor the vibration that comes from the wind turbine, see how it impacts now, the foundation, if there's any impacts. But yeah, I guess I would also imagine that your only limitation is your imagination to what you can monitor. And then I guess you could draw unique, aspects out of the data that you might get out. But yeah, first understanding what you want it for, and then to start exploring other potential options. No.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Masha, Bella, for that hand. I'll
Okay,
go
no,
on to the
thank you.
next hand. Thank you very much. So we've got Uncle Peter, Peter Inman, if you want to come through.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can,
Yes.
Uncle Peter.
Okay. This is an example, Huxley, of how not to do it. 50 years ago, in 1975, we put out a tender for monitoring a channel between the Doha port existing sorry, memory's going, from in Gaza down to the big Zaid industrial area, which we were doing. And the spec came back from Philips of The Hague in the Netherlands, which would have worked perfectly for the channel, La Manche, where you get a huge amount of traffic, whereas we were only looking at the odd ship a day. You really need to talk to the guys who know what they're doing and ask them, are we doing the right thing? Because there we did exactly the wrong thing. Right, that's me.
No, thank you, Uncle Peter. Huxley?
Yeah, I do appreciate that from Peter, because really we are not engineers. So we really rely on the engineer directing us and saying to us, I want to measure strain or pore pressure, and I want it like this, and I need you to do this. And our job is to provide that. But our job is not to specify, I don't think.
Yeah, we provide data. We provide data
Yeah.
to the engineers to make better decisions, giving you the data when you want it, in the manner that you want it, when you need it.
Yeah. Okay.
No, thanks. Thanks, Uncle Peter. Thanks, Alistair and Huxley. So let's go on to the next hand. I'll take Sanjay, and then I'll go to the comments. I'll just check if there's anything in the comments in the chat. Sanjay, you can come through.
Hi. Is there a way to monitor the movement of breccia layer underground?
Sanjay, if I could just ask you to just repeat that, you're a bit soft.
Okay. We come across breccia layer underground mining, and it has done quite a bit of damage to the infrastructure. Is there a way to monitor the movement of breccia layer?
There certainly are instruments available for you to do that. Things like extensometers or extensometers, in-place inclinometers, smart cables, things like that. So yes, definitely, there is equipment available for you to do that. But I think it would require a far more in-depth meeting from a rock engineering point of view, for you to specify to us the length and breadth of the issue that you're experiencing. And then we could specify accordingly, because you'll get, for example, in a multi-point borehole extensometer, you would get, 5, 6, 1 sensor placed within a cable. So we'd need to know how many sensors would be required. IPIs, is it every meter, every 2 meters, every 3 meters? What is it that you're looking for? But certainly, in general, yes, certainly can help you.
Yeah. Short answer, yes. Long answer, we'd need to meet to understand the project and specs.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
Yeah. No. Thanks for that, Sanjay. So
Thank
you're
you.
pretty much in a nutshell. Anything is possible. It's just a matter of engaging and then collaborating on ideas and making sure that you use the right tools in the right place. I'll take one comment from the chat. So I'll take the first one I see here. I see we've got something from Gideon Kutsia. How do you communicate from long railway tunnels that are more than 4 kilometers in access in remote areas? And how do you deal with theft and vandalism? So as you know, so you do get some really long railway tunnels. So
yes,
can you just give
or it could be a mine tunnel for that matter. But really, at the end of the day, is how do you communicate a signal down a tightly enclosed space that could also have lots of turns and lots of ups and downs and branches off of it. In short, Gideon, we use where we are not able to attain the full length. First of all, we would look at what type of network. Would we use a star network? Would we be using a flat mesh network, or a meshed network for that matter? If then in those instances where the star network is not giving you the range, we would use repeaters and other types of devices. And sometimes it makes sense to use more than one gateway. But to cost optimize, really at the end of the day, we would go to the LoRa type systems, and our system is called GeoWAN. That's a long range system, and 4 kilometers, if it's a straight line, we should be able to achieve it. If it's curved, we would use repeaters.
Yep. Well, that covers you then, Gideon. No, thanks for that. But yeah, no, look, there's obviously different means and ways. But then just okay, also look, I think you did come early on in terms of vandalism. It just depends where you place it, I guess. Because especially with a lot of these, the long tunnels, and I think from the railway point of view as well. You look at our own network, very remote areas. So yeah, I mean, it's a long time for people to go scratch around and start digging things out. It takes you quite a while to get it. But I guess it's something you can't really avoid something unless you're trying to hide it very, very carefully.
Look, first of all, do the correct site inspection. Go and have a look, speak to your client, understand what's possible and what's not possible, and agree on a way forward. You'll be surprised I could put a sensor on one of your rail track sleepers and you wouldn't even know it's there. We camouflage them. We do all sorts of clever things with installations, so I'll leave it there.
No, for sure.
I think the important part is it possible? Can stuff be stolen? Absolutely. But honestly, in the 5 years, we have not lost a sensor, not lost a single piece of equipment.
Excellent.
Yeah, there are clever ways of doing it. Is it possible? I'm sure
Yeah.
it'll happen at some point. But so far in 5 years, which I think is an interesting time period, not a single loss at any of our sites.
Yeah, it's reminded me of now when I engaged with the University of Pretoria. There was Dr. Vedant Steyn, and then the PhD candidate Dr. Andre Broekman. They were doing some unique work out there. The one thing they developed, they called it a clip. I can't remember what it was. It was clip something, but it was like, it looked like a ballast stone, and they hid the sensor inside it, so it was also used to monitor the vibration on the rail and all of that. But quite a unique application, and they ended up also putting something with avos and tomatoes and whatnot, just to try and track the journey from tree to market. So some quite unique things. But yeah, I mean, you can, if you want, you can hide these sensors as well. But yeah, just to add to your point there as well. Let me just take two more comments, questions from the chat. I'm going to just come back to Dr.
You dropped an egg, baby girl.
Okay, let me just okay, we need to try and mute. Okay, if we look at the common question here from Ismail, can you perform underwater surveying like bathymetric or supervising key sites? So I'll take this more almost like a LiDAR type survey underwater. Just your comment on that, Huxley?
Okay, so we are not service providers. That you would talk to a geomatics company, a surveying company. But really what you're looking for is a boat with radar or some form of sonar, which is GPS referenced from a baseline point of view. So no, that's not really our business to do bathymetric surveys. Certainly we would have instruments on the quay walls and things like that, on the harbor walls, or let's call it a underwater soil slope, something like that. Yes, we can do that, but no, we don't do sonar-based surveys. That's not our place.
So looking at the equipment that you got available, would you say that's almost like maybe for lack of a better word, a permanent bathy? I mean, something that's stuck onto the quay wall that you are then permanently monitoring the bottom of the seabed?
Yeah, so you could have a permanent bathy type, but not a portable or mobile type solution. But please just drop me a line. That's quite a technical topic. Bathymetric surveys are not that simple. So please just drop me a line, and I'm more than happy to help you and point you in the right direction and so forth.
Noted. Thanks for that. So I'll take one last comment from the chat from Peter. There's a different Peter, this one. What do you recommend for condition monitoring of buried pipelines, critical water supply, example for a mine? So I don't know if you dealt with that, just the monitoring underground buried pipelines.
It really depends on what we're monitoring with a buried pipeline. Is it a steel material? Is it plastic? Is it concrete? Are there joints? Things like that. So I mean, I think I understand if you're looking for a buried pipeline and it's concrete, you don't want it to bend, so it starts to spill and create a sinkhole or something like that. There are a number of different things. How deep is the pipe buried? That will determine what type of instrumentation you place on there. So again, every application can be quite unique, but I'm almost certain there definitely are sensors available for you for that. That doesn't sound too difficult. We just need to know a little bit more about the detail. May I have that gentleman's name who posed that question?
It was, you'll see in the chat, it was Peter, I think Peter Sheetlin or something like that. If you scroll in the chat, you can have a look.
Okay,
but we can also just share the chat afterwards with you. just for any other comments and questions. Okay, colleagues, I see there's quite a few hands up, so it looks like it's quite a robust discussion we're going to have. Huxley, Doctor, if you don't mind holding on just for a few extra minutes,
so I
same
can leave
for the
this
colleagues
now.
online. Sorry? Okay.
Yeah, now
I
there's
think
other questions, so I can leave.
it's a bit. Okay, is this Alistair?
No,
Sorry, I
that
didn't get.
wasn't from my side.
Okay. So yeah, if the audience online doesn't mind holding on just a few extra minutes, same with the presenters, then we can just at least entertain a few extra questions, if we're all okay on that. I've got Abrar. Abrar, you're going to come through with your question. I'm going to take 3 hands, and then I'll look to try and wrap up from my side. Abrar.
Thank you, everyone. Evening. My question is, are there any instances in South Africa where monitoring of structures and using whatever type of instrumentation is a legal or mandatory requirement for the upkeep of that particular structure or asset? Thanks.
Yeah, so a quick one really would be if you've heard of GISTM. There are a number of engineering companies providing monitoring services for different safety rated tailings dams or tailings storage facilities. Certainly, the mining industry is quite robust in its regulations in terms of how the mine manages these assets. We don't see that so much in the civils side of things. It's more a self-regulated thing at the moment. And then somewhere between self-regulated and let's call it legislatively regulated there, I think monitoring will help that space close and find a happy medium.
Yeah, I had a conversation with the CIDB this morning, and yeah, it's actually saying there's nothing formal. There's no formal mechanism to enforce in the construction space in our region yet. Yet it seems to be quite common in some other markets like Europe and the US.
Yeah. So maybe if I can come onto that as well. It was a question I was going to ask, but obviously the time dependent. It's still quite new, and I think it's quite new in our space. And the question I was going to ask, and if you just maybe give feedback, Huxley, as well. If you look at now this, so technology is being developed. It's giving us accurate results, and over time it's going to improve. When it comes to machine learning and all of that, it will get better and better. Say now that we know, and I don't know if it's a question that you can answer, but just let's have a look. Okay, we've got the information, we've got the technology, it's proven, but I, as an engineer, I don't make use of it. But how can I say, it's in the case if that something goes wrong, let's say a structure failed and there was warning bells, there's technology that exists that could have monitored and prevented a serious failure of assets. Now, coming to the court of law, could I be held accountable for not applying technology, knowing that there is technology available to have prevented it? So it becomes that ethical dilemma now. So what do you see within the space going forward? Are we going to get to that point? Is it something to be worried about? Because I mean, like I said, technology is getting better and better. At what point do we need to then rely on technology that could have prevented a tragedy from occurring?
Tough one to answer, not as lawyers, hey, Hux?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. Don't want to be one.
Something we need to think about.
I will just go based on this. My previous statement from one of my mentors was, are your actions 100% defensible? And if you ask that of yourself in your normal course of whatever you're doing, you know, did you do all that you could? And if you did, then you're good. If you didn't, I don't know, you know, perhaps you need to ask yourself that question. I don't know.
I guess, look, it's just something that as an industry, we just need to be mindful of, is that could I have prevented it with the tools that's available, and tools are becoming available. So yeah, I guess it's a new area, it's a new space. Could we be held liable as professionals, knowing that there was technology available, but we didn't make use of it? Something to contemplate. But yeah, I think let me not go into that discussion for another day. I will just take just two more hands, and I'll be looking to try and wrap up. So let me check. Mashabela, is this an old hand? Your hand is still up. Is that an old hand?
Yeah, no, that's an old hand.
Okay, no worries. Let's go to Libone. If you can come through.
Hi,
Libone, and then Peter will be last. Yeah, come through.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. I'm a tailings engineer, so I work on tailings dams mostly. And I just had a question regarding brittle failure, because I attended a webinar this morning on liquefaction of tailings, and the panelists expressed the opinion that surveillance isn't really very useful in terms of trying to identify and help preventing brittle failure, because it happens so quickly, as we saw on Brumadinho, and there's no real warning signs before, and there's no time for anyone to react. So I just wanted to ask, in your opinion, would you agree with that statement, or is, in your experience, have there been any projects that you've worked on where there's some sort of instrumentation that the engineers have specified that they're with the aim of trying to monitor for brittle failure, or is there any up and coming technology that could potentially assist us with this?
A really interesting question. And I'm afraid probably not simply answered. First of all, I'm not a tailings engineer. But what I will say is that in most instances of displacement of some form or another, there's usually a few occurrences prior to that, however small or micro or whatever. But I don't really carry enough knowledge to talk to you about brittle failure per se. But I can tell you that there are some extremely good instrumentation sets out there that could have at least contributed to some level of notice of condition, not necessarily failure, but certainly condition. A number of tailing engineers that we deal with are big on poor water pressures, phreatic lines, tilt, saturation, depositing. Even some of the guys that we deal with have got IPIs, strings very deep IPIs. They've got fiber optics in their monitoring. So there certainly must be some type of instrumentation out there, but I would really like to connect with you more and just delve into this more about what you'd look for. And then let's see if we can satisfy that demand and help. And I want to learn with you. So
actually, if I could add, I would like to add a bit of some of the successful research project we had exactly on tailing.
Please come through.
And tailing. We did even publish the results. So we are using ambient noise, some passive seismic cubes. They are very, very small nodes. And just with the small profile, we were able to actually create a cross-section of the dam wall without vibration that made it fall, but with vibration from the surroundings, we were able to actually target where the drainage was concentrated. And it was it was a good exercise to see with this ambient noise technology, we were able to actually target the exact location of where we should focus attention for the civil engineers. And we now trying to take this further, as Huxley said, the fiber optics is really something that can be used for ambient noise monitoring. And if you have a fiber, then you can monitor really small, very small area. In the lab here, we were able to model some sinkholes, and with the fiber, we could detect the cracks before the whole. So it's all possible, but it's we are on the limit of where the research is, and perhaps the industry is still behind. But the fiber optic and the passive nodes is certainly something that is going to be used more and more in these circumstances.
No, thank you for that, Doctor. Is that that research paper, is it something you can share, maybe, Doctor, then what we can do from Masad and Uncle Tom? We can then just email that to all the attendees. If you can maybe just send that through to us.
Yeah, sure. It will just take me a bit of time to find where it is, so I will send it.
Anytime, yeah. So even later on this week or next week, if you can get that to us, then we can then share that with the audience. Libune, just to check from your side, does that cover you?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, colleagues, I'm going to just take one last hand. Paul, apologies, I might have to cut you out, but you can drop your question in the chat. So let me check. Uncle Peter, is that hand is an old hand or is it a new hand, Uncle Peter?
Yes, I want to give Huxley a chance to save the Western world.
Okay.
We are under attack because of undersea cable interference. Can he come with a nice solution which will warn us that somebody's about to attack one of our cables so we can defend ourselves? It's just a thought. I don't mean to give an answer immediately.
No, thanks, Uncle Peter. So I think it's just for noting.
Thanks, Peter. I'll have a chat with Elon Musk next time I talk to him.
Okay.
No, thanks. Okay, colleagues, apologies. I'm going to have to close the hands. I just wanted to ask one last question to Doctor, and then I'll look at wrapping up. So just from an academic point of view, and I think with you as an academic and looking at now our future engineers. So with Nelson Mandela University, so what role do you see, yourself playing within your field and as Nelson Mandela University in terms of fostering the new generation with this type of technology? Just is it something that you're looking at the university? Obviously, you are doing the research. So how are we then nurturing our young engineers towards this space, Doctor?
Yeah, well, I believe my role is to motivate, and I must say the young generation.
Let me mute here. Let me mute. Okay, please continue.
Yeah, our young new students, they're really excited about new technologies, about big data, and I think to help to get them access to some of this sensor or some of this data, I think is very important. And of course, a university on its own is not able to provide all these opportunities. So that's why we need help, collaboration with the other organization and the industry to enable a student to work on a small data set, or to have a student, especially going in the field, to see the installation of such of this project. But in our group, because we do 2 years project for masters or 3 years project for PhD, the student do have the time to spend as much energy and passion into developing a skill, even if it's in civil engineering or structural geology. And at this level, we can have long-term project. But I think to have field-based and examples accessible for the university to teach in classes is important. And I do believe the field exposure and having practicals in the industry. In my days, I did my learning in France through practical in industry, and it was very useful to be exposed and work with the people in the field to see how it's like. And I believe hands-on practice is what would make better civil engineers and better geologists.
No, thank you for that, Doctor. Thank you very much. And I know, excellent. And I'm sure, Huxley, from your side, yourself and the team, if there's opportunities to reach out to the universities just to try and give that practical experience. So colleagues, we are coming towards the end. I did drop in our sort of assessment form. If you can kindly just fill out the assessment form. Just so in closing, I think then we start with Joseph Huxley, and then we'll go to Alistair. In 30 seconds or less, what final message would you want to leave with the audience here today? We are a mix of professionals, young and old, and young students as well. So yeah, just your final closing message, Huxley.
Technology is not scary if you apply your mind correctly. Please use us. We're here to help. We want to give back and be more involved with the engineering industry. So yes, please contact us, and thank you so much for your time. It's been really great. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Alistair, from your side?
From my side, I just want to say, I think you can see from the presentation Huxley did that there's a lot of information around what options there are out there. We've been very careful to select the partners that we have based on their ability to meet those demands. But we realize we're quite niche. We're not trying to be everything to anyone.
Yeah.
And we're very honest when we can say, no, this isn't the right fit. We're not going to try and sell something to someone that's not applicable. So please reach out to us. A lot of these things need a deep discussion into the actual project to be able to give an intelligent answer as to what it is. So please reach out to us with specific projects if you do have, or questions that might apply to a specific project. We'd love to be able to have that discussion and see if we can help.
Thanks, Alistair. Doctor, your closing comments?
No, thanks everyone. I think it's exciting times to be able to integrate this technology and to build new partnership between industry and academics. I think we can really help each other, and I really appreciate the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Just to give everyone an insight for next month's fireside chat, we will be looking at geotechnical laboratories and soil testing. So just something as a soil sticking to geologists. If you want to join us, Doctor, you're more than welcome to. I'll engage with you on the side. But yeah, so just to everyone online, thank you for your time. Thank you for entertaining us. Just to for a few extra minutes. Thank you to my presenters. So Alistair, Dr. Lionel, Huxley, thank you very much. Appreciate it from the SAICI side. And thank you to SAICI for then hosting this platform, and to our audience also for your questions and engagement. It's always much appreciated. It makes the discussion more genuine, more robust. So thank you for that. And yeah, so looking forward to the next SAICI fireside chat. So colleagues, until next time, let's keep on learning, keep on exploring. This is the Knowledge Trailblazer. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well done. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, colleagues.
Bye.